PALZ shows Europe as it really is. Hello and welcome to Vox Civica, where democracy has a voice. I'm Georgios Karagiorgos, journalist and correspondent for the European Youth Press, and part of the editorial team behind PALZ, our youth-led platform for in-depth journalism and civic storytelling across Europe and beyond. In today's episode, we are joined by Della Porta, Professor of Political Science and founding Dean at the Scuola Normale Superiore in Florence, where she also leads the Center on Social Movement Studies. She is one of the world's foremost scholars on protest movements, democratic transformations, and civil society. In this conversation, we discuss her latest book, Guerra all'antisemitismo, and the shrinking space for dissent in Europe. We explore the limits of protest, the tension between identity and class in civic struggles, and how moral panics are being weaponized to silence opposition. From Germany's institutional response to antisemitism to the role of Holocaust memory in saving public discourse, Professor Della Porta unpacks the growing risks of equating political criticism with a hate speech. And thus we turn to Gaza. One question remains: when silence becomes policy, what kind of future is Europe really choosing? Professor Della Porta, thank you for joining us. It's an honor. Before we dive into your latest book, the original title is Guerra all'antisemitismo, il panico morale come strumento di repressione politica, translated as War on Antisemitism, Moral Panic as a Tool of Political Repression. I would like to begin with the current moment in Europe. Many argue that we are witnessing democratic backsliding, a shrinking civic space, and a rising polarization. From your perspective, how do you interpret this moment?
I think it is a moment of democratic backsliding, but also of strong resistance to it. So we see one of the strongest mobilization in solidarity with Gaza that is at the same time triggering very heavy repressions, especially in some countries, but at the same time it's a very broad mobilization. So from just the last few days, what happened in Italy has been dockers that refused to upload weapons for Israel to vessels. We have had also yesterday the hunger strike of about 30,000 health workers all over Italy. And we have had protests everywhere. In Greece also, you had the protest in many harbors against the land occupations by Israeli firms, the use of the land as a place for relax for soldiers who have participated in the genocide. And everywhere, if we look in Southern Europe, we find a very strong sign of resistance. And this is important because I think it is not only the resistance to the genocide, but it is also more deeply a development of an awareness about the colonialism, the long-lasting effect of racism, and so also putting into questions which are the core values of our civilizations. Against this, governments have used heavy repressions, and what has emerged has been also double standards with the different, very different ways in which the aggressions of Russia on Ukraine has been dealt with in comparison with lack of reactions to the genocide of Israeli in Palestine. We also, I think it is important to note, to address your questions, that all these mobilizations have not stopped the war, but have created a very important type of transformations, also in the sense of having successfully mobilized the public opinion and produced more and more alliances on reflections and actions against the genocide.
Well, that leads me to the role of protest and public action. You have studied mobilizations extensively. I'm thinking, for example, the massive protests in Greece in recent years or the ongoing mobilizations in Serbia. Both have shown impressive energy and persistence, but I'm personally concerned about how far such movements can actually bring about change these days. In Greece, we didn't manage, for example, to sustain them long enough to produce or capitalize on real political results. And in Serbia, despite their duration, the impact also seems limited. How do you see this tension between mobilization and lasting political transformation?
There are moments in which changes happen quickly. So take the mobilizations against austerity policies at the beginning of the previous decade. You have, especially in Greece or in Spain, very fast transformations in the political system, with Syriza and Podemos representing these strong innovations. It took some times also there, but it was relatively fast in terms of the traditional way in which social movement play a role. Greece and Serbia have had similar type of movements you mentioned, which have been different from those movements in which political organizations lead the protest from the very beginning. These have been characterized by a similar grassroots reactions to accidents that have been considered as exemplary of the ways in which capitalist development despise and produce damages to human life. And this movement has grown enormously, also with the participations of young people. Differently than in the anti-austerity protest, they clearly have a political message, but they don't have yet a type of political immediate transformations in the political system. Nevertheless, these are young movements. So also if we look at the movement in the past, 2011 was an exception. Usually movements tend to have need more time to have an impact. These movements also are intersecting with other movements like the ones on Palestine, mobilizations by labor, which takes new forms and so on. And so I think it is too early to see electoral results, but I think that the immediate effect that we see is in the politizations of so-called normal people. So these are movements in which not only those who were politicized were active, but to the contrary, very widespread basis of people who entered politics on the basis of moral concerns and direct emotional moral shock for what had happened. I think it will have an effect in terms of creating a generations which is politicized to these new values, sensitive to these new values.
Before we turn to your book, let me ask something related with this political environment. Some critics argue that progressive movements in Europe have leaned too heavily on cultural battles and identity politics, for example, around immigration, religion, or gender, while leaving aside class and economic inequality. For me, disclaimer, liberation has never been a one-side or manichaeistic dilemma in any case. I don't see identity and class as mutually exclusive, but what's your take? Do you think this shift has nonetheless played a role, let's say, in the shrinking of civic space and the rise of moral panics today?
I agree with you that the two are not opposed to each other. And in fact, that's successfully in the past, the left had combined the idea of the different economic societies with also the idea of a different culture, a counterculture often has been defined. But what is true is that, for instance, in those countries in Central Europe, where the center-left parties, following, among others, suggestions by some political scientists, have moved from the defense of the working class as the main social basis to the assumptions that the working class no longer exists and that they had to move to environmental issues, post-materialist issues, and so on. And this, I think, make a big difference between countries in which the two issues remain interlinked, and migrations is also an economic, social, and class issues, not a cultural one. And countries instead in which the social democratic part of the political spectrum proclaimed that they embrace the middle classes. And from Germany to the UK, I think that this has created serious problems for the parties of the center-left. What we see is that in Spain or in Greece, taking these two main examples, the fact that the center-left parties saw the competition on their left by respectively Podemos and Syriza has moved them towards recognizing the centrality of class issues. In Spain, it is more clear with the joint government, PSOE and Podemos, but I think that also in Greece, there has been this reshuffling on the left that had created transformations also in the center-left.
Definitely this gives some perspective. But now let's turn to your book. You describe how vague definitions of antisemitism are mobilized in ways that criminalize dissent. What does this tell us about the state of democracy in Europe today and the risks of conflating criticism of governance with hate speech?
I think this is also related with the previous questions, because the big risk that I see in this is related with the refusal of Western democracy to really accept to take responsibilities and to give rights to a large component, a larger and larger component of citizens that are citizens with a migration background and with different religious, ethnic identifications and so on. Because what I think has been at the basis of the weaponizations of the discourse on antisemitism to restrict citizens' right has been a strong racist type of alliances that started with the sort of paradoxical support for Israel by the far right, and then expanded in many countries, involving also center-left parties that converged with the far right on the ideas that Western civilizations is the Christian-Judaic type of values that are mobilized against Islam, against Muslim, against Arabs and citizens with Arab background, but more in general against migrants. And this, I think, is a main challenge that has been reflected in a very selective type of repressive policies in which the far right is less and less repressed, while repression focuses on the left and solidarity with Gaza and so on.
Well, nevertheless, it's a growing dynamic. The least I can say when dissent is framed as hate. The space for democratic disagreement starts to narrow dangerously. These bring us directly to the case of Germany, I think. In your book, you describe how the struggle against anti-Semitism has evolved from grassroots activism into a state-driven institutional framework, I would say. What are the implications of that shift? Does it change how we balance the need to protect communities with the right to express political critique?
It has been always to link with the previous questions. I think what happened has been a separation of the fight against racism, inside which the sort of progressive struggle against anti-Semitism as a form of racism was rooted, and instead considering anti-Semitism as something different, that is instead the ways in which the what I call the weaponizations, the institutionalizations of anti-Semitism, of the struggle against anti-Semitism has been developed, in the sense that while initially anti-Semitism was considered to be on the left as a form of racism, against which a universalistic type of argument about the equality of all citizens, race, gender, and so on had to be mobilized. The type of arguments that is developed now when using struggle against anti-Semitism as a tool of repression is that anti-Semitism is something special, different from racism, and that there is a double standard to be implemented in the identifications with the Jewish people with Israel. This is a main element which I mention in the book, looking especially at several steps in the institutionalizations of anti-Semitism through especially parliamentary resolutions that have established a definition of anti-Semitism as the one defined by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliances, which tend to identify criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. That says that if you use terms related with Nazism, and apply them to Israel, this is automatically antisemitism, or that tend to, in this way, consider critique of Israel as intrinsically antisemitism. I think that this is extremely dangerous because in a moment in which the most different actors tend to recognize that Israel is carrying out a genocide. If you adopt this type of definitions, it means that any type of criticism of a genocide would be prohibited on the basis of this type of identifications, which is also historically wrong because in Israel less than half of the Jewish population lives, and many of the Jewish anti-Zionist, universalistic people oppose the genocide. So this type of definitions has been institutionalized also through the creations of a network of commissioners, not on racism, not against racism, but only against antisemitism, which have adopted this type of definitions even against Jewish people that protest against Israel. And this has gone together with other type of decisions, often semi-legal, semi-law type of decisions that have criminalized organizations like the BDS, and together with the criminalizations of the BDS boycott, divest and sanctions organizations, also the statement, the declaration of the Jewish voices against for a right peace in the Middle East as extremist. Slogans like "From the River to the Seas" have been considered as automatically promoting terrorism, Free Palestine, red triangles, and so on. And so what happened is that all this institutional machine has been at the basis of a repression of a protest that are ongoing nevertheless in many countries, and which are fundamental for democratic development.
Another key thread in the book is the question of perception versus reality. And by that, I mean that I found very interesting the fact that you point out this junction, if I can say, that official statistics show antisemitism as overwhelmingly driven by the far right, yet in public discourse often associates it with the left or migrant communities. What does this gap reveal about the political use of data and fear in Europe? I think this also goes for Greece. In a way, this is a pattern.
This has meant, from the point of view of the development of definitions of what the West is, it has meant that the far right is included in this definition. So even when in countries like Germany, there is a formal denunciations of the far right as racist and so on, it is meaningful and important to recall the fact that all these rules and regulations, parliamentary decisions and so on, have been made with the support of the far right. And so the investment of the state has been also in the creation of statistics that they could use in order to legitimize this, what I call in the book, moral panic, the singling out of migrants and the left as a sort of scapegoat. And this has been done by fabricating new type of statistics, which have been criticized in details by experts because they count any slogan or call for free Palestine as anti-Semitic, or any protest against the genocide as anti-Semitic. But when you go back to the violent crime against the Jewish people, and even the type of deep-rooted anti-Semitic narratives, this is embedded in the far right. So the paradox can be also highlighted when we look at Trump, who presents himself as the champion of the struggles against anti-Semitism, but the Make America Great Again movement is the most anti-Semitic that you can imagine, because they spread also during the pandemic period all the possible conspiracy theories against the Jews as at the basis of the spreading of the virus and so on. So I think what it tells us is that, especially as sociologists, but also as people who deal with statistics, is that it is important to look inside this data and to consider the way in which they are produced and the changes in this. For instance, the statistics from the police in Germany have been quite reliable up to a certain point, when they started to consider also this type of slogans against Israel as a sign of anti-Semitism. And this is also when they started to change their ways, the statistics became also very difficult to use as an indicator of the real spread of the phenomenon, or even to create a phenomenon that is not there really.
Something that ties all these threads together is memory politics. You trace how Holocaust memory culture evolved into an official state narrative that sometimes silences alternative perspectives. In a European context marked by colonial legacies and, as you mentioned, and rising racism, how is this selective memory shaping which voices are heard or excluded?
This has been something that has been studied by scholars of memories that initially praised Germany as capable of dealing with the past, but then they noted the development of the memory of the Holocaust into an exclusive visions of Nazism as the only crime against humanities that excluded other crimes against humanities, like the slaves or other genocide, like the type of sufferance that colonialism imposed upon people. And this was functional to the development of an idea of Western civilization as a good development that was just interrupted by Nazism. Nazism as a parenthesis. In the reality, when this type of memory interacts with other memories of colonialism, of Nakba, so of the equivalent of the Holocaust for the Palestinians. It would need flexibility to open up and recognize the common basis of oppression, of racism, and so on. But the type of memory that has been developed, a memory in which the never again is only thought about as something that affects only Jewish people, has deprived this capacity of memory to teach us something about the present. In fact, what is paradoxical in the German case is that historians or scholars that have studied memories have been immediately attacked on the basis of their attempt to compare different historical periods, their attempt to compare the Holocaust with other moments, or to state the importance to create open memories in which different groups can recognize themselves. And this is something that is still at the basis of this weaponization of the struggles against antisemitism. The denial of other crimes, the attempt to deny comparison as an instrument that's without denying the extreme gravity, sufferance of the Jewish people during the Holocaust, but could also recognize the suffering of other people, and especially learning from the past in order not to reproduce those dynamics that clearly would not be reproduced in exactly the same way with the same victims, but can be reproduced as a genocide in different ways and with different victims, like the Palestinians nowadays.
Wrapping up, and before my final question, let's look forward a bit. What can social movements, academics, or cultural workers do to resist these dynamics of moral panic without themselves being silenced or delegitimized?
I think that the type of reactions by critical scholars, critical journalists, has been very strong and very effective. Because if we consider nowadays the opinion polls about public opinion on Gaza, what we see is that they move exactly in the opposite directions than what the governments would want to do. So you have 80% of the public opinion that criticized not only what Israel is doing in Gaza as a genocide, but also what our governments are doing in supporting this genocide. So I think that this type of moral panic wave has been, to a large extent, defeated. First of all, in their capacity to affect the public opinion. They have been more effective with some elites, with some mainstream media, with some organizations, pressure organizations, and so on, within the academic institutions. But there have been ineffective in reaching the public, and they have been contrasted by large social movements. I give you an example about my own institutions, the Scuola Normale Superiore. About 1 year ago, we decided voted on a statement in which we called for divestment and boycott against all research projects that involved dual use with military use. We were attacked by some groups as anti-Semite, and so on. It was not a big attack, but still was something that happened and that was noted at the time. In July, we passed in the Senate a much more radical resolutions in which we voted for the boycott of all Israeli institutions directly or indirectly involved in violations of human rights. No one told us that we were anti-Semite. So I think that this weapon is weakened already in some countries. I think that in Italy, yesterday there was this hunger strike I mentioned of 15,000 workers in the health sectors. I've read for my research about 50 articles on each of these in different contexts in all big and small cities and so on. None of them was unsympathetic. To the contrary, even mainstream journals recognized the importance to oppose a genocide. So my impression is that what we are doing has been effective already. And what we are doing and have been doing has been just using our professional skills in order to investigate what is going on. Which has been difficult at times, especially for journalists, given the conditions of restrictions of possibilities to accept sources. But at the same time, I think they have shown the creativity of many such groups and also the capacity of spreading informations that in my own research I've seen growing a lot with the new type of technical instruments which are available, but also critical skills by young scholars and activists.
And now to close, what does all this mean for Europe today? I'm thinking especially of the lack of freedom to criticize Israel, till now at least, and the genocide in Gaza. With this intellectual and political alignment, have we, through our silence, not all of us, signed onto a future built on violations of international law and indifference to human rights?
I think, like many of us, I see the very negative moment in the sense also that Gaza has been destroyed, 100,000 of people have been killed, all people living in Gaza have been traumatized, and now also in the West Bank there are killings, deprivations, torture, and violations of international law. Also, pessimistic visions. Our governments and the European Union different institutions have been totally unwilling or unable to defend international law. With some differences, Spain or Norway or Ireland, Slovenia, also with different constellations, actors have been more outspoken. But what we saw is a degree of cynicism and disrespect for international law that has destroyed decades of assumptions about international law as a liberal value. To the extreme, it goes to the extreme cases of countries, government in countries like Germany, to say that they would host Netanyahu, notwithstanding the mandate, arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court, to the disregard for sanctions and so on that are applied to Russia but not to Israel. So there is a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about the effect that we see on our own democracies. On the other hand, I think it is a very intense time in which there is also a lot of oppositions. I don't know if it is too optimistic to say that the tide is turning in this moment, also because of the moral shock for what we see is going on Gaza, notwithstanding the fact that governments and mainstream media didn't want us to see what was going on. And this, I think, has created mobilizations among people who were previously not mobilized, mobilizations about new generation, capacity to create alliances. What we saw in our research is that even political groups that were competing with each other, even trade unions that were fighting each other on different conceptions of struggle, student groups that were not talking with each other in the past, considered the moral duty to act on Gaza as so relevant that they overcome previous divisions and started to mobilize together. This also, what I saw has been that the diaspora community of Palestinians, but also migrants with different backgrounds, have been not only present, but also very often important brokers in these alliances. And they made many things understood that were not understood even in the left in the past. So the importance of colonialism, of colonial values, racism, also often inside progressive organizations, the importance to take up different point of view. And so I think that this moment can also produce something long-lasting and positive on the left. It's like Gramsci said, a moment of monsters when the old is dying and the new is not born yet. But I think there is also the possibility that this new, which is going to be born, can be born like a most beautiful baby, that if this type of mobilizations had not happened. In this final word also, since you are Greek and I'm Italian, I think that's what this moment has shown in terms of development in Europe is some potential of the left in southern Italy. Southern Europe. The fact that some also resilience of past tradition of resistance, some embeddedness in grassroots movements, I think allowed for more broader type of resistance to the backlash than in other countries.
Well, Professor, I truly hope that the newborn Gramsci envisioned will soon arrive and lead these transitional monsters into oblivion. Thank you for this deeply insightful conversation. You have helped us unpack not only the complex themes, the terrain of your latest book, but also the broader challenges facing democracy, activism, and collective memory in Europe today. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. And I think it is very important what you are doing. And I wish big success with this series.
Make an impact on Europe with PulZ. Publish European stories, learn journalism, and make your voice heard.